Hey guys, tonight we begin with a gentle slip into the past, where the air smells of damp earth and wood smoke, and the world is lit only by the flicker of a candle or the glow of a hearth. Picture yourself in medieval Europe, not as a knight or a king, but as a peasant, someone whose life is tied to the land, the seasons, and the whims of those above you. It's a life that sounds simple, almost romantic, until you realize the irony. The same soil that feeds you also chains you, and the freedom you dream of is as distant as a star. This isn't a tale of grand battles or heroic quests. It's the story of ordinary people scraping by in a world that's as unforgiving as it is fascinating. If you find this kind of thing soothing, maybe like and subscribe, but only if you feel like it. For now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, and let the hum of the modern world fade. Settle in, and let's walk through a time when life was slower, harder, and strangely absurd in ways you might not expect. You're about to discover why being a peasant in the Middle Ages was a lot less charming than the history books might suggest. You wake up in medieval Europe, sometime around the year 1250. The air is chilly, and your bed, if you can call it that, is a pile of straw stuffed into a sack, laid on a dirt floor. The straw pokes through the rough cloth, prickling your skin, and you're already wondering if you'll ever feel rested again. Your home is a single room, maybe 10 feet by 12, with walls of wattle and daub, sticks woven together and slathered with a mix of mud, straw, and yes, a bit of cow dung for good measure. It's not exactly cozy, but it's what you've got. Outside, the village is stirring. Roosters crow, though you're not sure why they bother. Dawn is still a grey smear on the horizon, and you're already up. Your day starts early because the land doesn't care about your sleep schedule. You're a peasant, which means you're a serf, bound to the Lord's estate. You don't own the land you work, you just get to toil on it. In return, you're allowed to live, which when you think about it, is a deal that feels suspiciously like a threat. The irony here is that you're not even at the bottom of the pile. There are landless labourers who'd kill for your patch of dirt, and you're reminded of this every time you see one begging at the edge of the village. You pull on your tunic, coarse wool that itches like a personal vendetta, and step outside. The ground is muddy, because it's always muddy, and your shoes, if you have them, are little more than leather scraps tied to your feet. You're already cold, and the day hasn't even started. Your first task is to tend the fields, but not your fields. The Lord's land comes first, always. You owe him 3 days of work each week, ploughing, sowing, or harvesting, depending on the season. If you're lucky, you might get a crust of bread from the manor's kitchen as a reward, though it's more likely to be mouldy than fresh. You trudge toward the fields, your breath visible in the morning air, and you can't help but notice the manor house in the distance. It's not a castle, but it's sturdy, with actual walls and a roof that doesn't leak. You wonder what it's like to live somewhere that doesn't smell like damp straw and regret. The humour in this, if you can call it that, is that everyone around you accepts this as normal. The Lord, the priest, even your fellow peasants, they all act like this is just how life works. You're born, you work, you die, and if you're lucky, you don't starve in between. It's a system so rigid it makes the seasons look unpredictable, and yet here you are, living it. As you pick up your wooden plough, you can't help but think, surely there's more to life than this. Spoiler alert, for a peasant, there usually isn't. It's midday now, and your stomach is growling louder than the village dogs. A low rumble that feels like it's staging a revolt against you. You've been working the Lord's field since dawn, guiding an ox that's as stubborn as the clods of earth you're trying to turn. Your hands are blistered, your back aches, and you're starting to think the ox has the better deal. At least it gets to eat grass. You, on the other hand, have to wait for your meal, and when it comes, it's not exactly the stuff of ballads. Let's talk about food. because it's one of the great ironies of your life as a peasant in medieval Europe, around 1250. You grow it, you harvest it, you grind it, but you don't get to keep much of it. The food you eat is less a reward and more a test of endurance, a daily battle against hunger, monotony, and the occasional mouldy surprise. You're a serf, bound to the Lord's estate, which means most of your crop, wheat, rye, barley, goes straight to the manor or the church. The Lord takes his share because, well, he owns the land, and you're just borrowing it with your sweat. The church demands a tithe, 10% of everything you produce, because apparently even God needs your grain to keep the heavens running. What's left for you is the dregs, the stuff deemed too coarse or too meagre for anyone with a title. Your bread, the backbone of your diet, isn't the soft golden loaf you might dream about. It's a dense, gritty slab of rye or barley, often mixed with chaff, ground peas, or even sawdust if the harvest was lean. It's so tough it wears down your teeth, and you've learned to check for green patches before biting in. Mold isn't just a possibility, it's a personality trait of your food. You've heard whispers of white bread at the Lord's table, soft and fluffy like a cloud. But that's as fantastical to you as a unicorn. You'd laugh at the thought if your jaw weren't already sore from chewing. Your main meal is pottage, a word that sounds deceptively cozy but delivers a watery stew that's more survival than cuisine. You make it in a single iron pot over the fire, tossing in whatever you can scrounge. Cabbage, leeks, a turnip if you're feeling prosperous. If you're lucky, there's a scrap of pork fat or a bone to boil for flavour, but don't hold your breath. Meat is a rare guest at your table, maybe once a month if the harvest was good and the Lord's feeling generous enough to let you keep a sliver of bacon. You've got one scrawny chicken, and every egg it lays feels like a small miracle, though you're always half expecting the Lord's bailiff to swoop in and claim it as tax. You've learned to savour those eggs, cracking them carefully, knowing they might be the only protein you see for weeks. Vegetables are your mainstay, but they're not the crisp, colourful things you might imagine. They're often wilted or half rotten, and you eat them anyway because wasting food is a sin you can't afford. The real twist of the knife is the ale. You drink it all day, not because you're chasing a buzz, but because the water's a gamble. Wells are often contaminated with who knows what, animal waste, mud, or worse, and boiling water isn't a habit anyone's picked up yet. Ale, weak and watery as it is safer, so you sip it from dawn to dusk. It's brewed from the same grain you can't afford to eat, which is its own kind of cruel joke. You spend hours threshing barley, only to turn it into a drink that tastes like regret and barely keeps you hydrated. It's not strong enough to get you drunk, just enough to make you wish you were. You carry a small jug of it to the fields, and every sip reminds you of the grain you could have baked into bread. The humour here, if you can call it that, is that you're brewing your own chains, pouring your labour into a drink that's as much a necessity as it is a letdown. You sit down for your meal on a wooden bench, the only furniture in your hut besides a wobbly table that's seen better days. Your family, maybe a spouse, a couple of kids, if they've survived the last fever, huddles around the pot. The fire casts a dim glow and the air smells of smoke and damp straw. You ladle out the pottage, careful to portion it evenly because there's never quite enough. The bread you break is so hard it could double as a weapon, and you chew slowly, partly to make it last, partly because rushing might chip a tooth. Your kids are quiet, too tired to complain, though you can see the hunger in their eyes. You try to make it a moment of togetherness, maybe telling a story about a clever fox outwitting a wolf, but the weight of the day presses down on you all. You're all tired, all hungry, and all painfully aware that this is as good as it gets. The irony stings when you think about the Lord's table, just a mile away in the manor house. You've heard rumours of his feasts, roasted venison, spiced wine, pies stuffed with things you can't even name. You've never seen it, of course. No peasant sets foot in the manor unless they're delivering something or begging for mercy. But you imagine it, and the thought makes your pottage taste even thinner. The Lord's eating your harvest, your labour, while you're choking down bread that's more grit than grain. And yet, you're the one who planted the wheat, who reaped it, who carried it to his granary. It's a system so lopsided it's almost comical, like a jester's joke that only the audience gets. There are moments, though, when you find a way to fight back in your own small way. Maybe you hide a handful of barley in your tunic, just enough to make a slightly heartier pottage tomorrow. Or you barter with a neighbour, trading a leek for a bit of cheese they managed to smuggle past the bailiff. These are tiny victories, but they matter. They're your way of saying you're not just a cog in the Lord's machine. You've heard of peasants who tried to grind their own grain at home, defying the Lord's monopoly on the mill. It's illegal, and the bailiff would confiscate your quern if he caught you, but the thought of it makes you smile. It's a quiet rebellion, baked into every loaf you eat. As you finish your meal, you rinse your bowl with a splash of ale, not because it's dirty, but because you can't waste a single drop of anything. You look around your hut at the flickering fire, the straw-strewn floor, the faces of your family. This is your world, and it's not much, but it's yours. You know tomorrow will bring more of the same, more pottage, more gritty bread, more ale that tastes like defeat. But you also know you'll keep going, because that's what peasants do. You don't have the luxury of despair. You scrape the pot, you chew the bread, and you sip the ale, because every bite, every swallow, is a small act of defiance against a world that wants to grind you down. And in that, there's a strange kind of pride, a stubborn refusal to let the hunger win. The sun is sinking now, painting the sky a dull orange over the endless fields you've spent your day breaking your back to tend. You're a peasant in medieval Europe, around 1250, and your work on the Lord's land is done for now, but you're far from free. Your own small plot, a scrappy patch of dirt that barely feeds your family, still needs attention, and the light is fading fast. But before you can even think about your own survival, there's a heavier weight pressing down on you, a web of obligations that binds you tighter than any rope. Being a peasant isn't just about farming, it's about navigating a system of duties so relentless it feels like the universe itself is keeping a ledger, and you're always in debt. The Lord, the church, the king, they all want a piece of you, and they've got the power to take it. The irony is bitter. You're the one who keeps their world running, but to them, you're just a pair of hands, as replaceable as the ox you guide. Let's start with the Lord, the man who looms over your life like a storm cloud that never quite breaks. He owns the land you work, the house you sleep in, even the air you breathe, or so it feels. You're a serf, not a slave, but the distinction is academic when you can't leave without his permission. You owe him 3 days of work each week, ploughing his fields, harvesting his crops, repairing his fences, before you can even touch your own plot. It's called week work, and it's as cheerful as it sounds. If you're lucky, he might toss you a mouldy crust from his kitchen as a reward, but don't count on it. His manor house, just visible across the fields, is a sturdy thing with stone walls and a roof that doesn't leak, unlike your hut of mud and straw. You've never been inside, but you've heard stories of roaring fires, tables groaning with food, and beds that don't stab you with straw. Meanwhile, you're out here, hoe in hand, wondering if you'll ever know what it's like to be warm and dry at the same time. The Lord's reach extends beyond labour. Want to grind your grain into flour? You'll use his mill, and he'll take a cut, maybe 1/10 of your grain, maybe more, depending on his mood. Want to bake that flour into bread? His oven isn't free either. Another toll, another handful of your harvest gone. Even the stream where you'd like to catch a fish belongs to him, and poaching is a crime that could cost you a hand or worse. The bailiff, the Lord's enforcer, is always watching, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. He's the kind of man who'd fine you for sneezing too loudly if he thought he could get away with it. You've heard tales of peasants grinding grain at home with a hand quern to avoid the mill tax, but if the bailiff catches you, he'll smash the quern and fine you enough to starve you for a month. The humour here, dry as the dust in your fields, is that the Lord calls this protection. Protection from what? Bandits, maybe, but you're starting to think the real threat is the man in the manor house. Then there's the church, which makes the Lord look almost reasonable by comparison. The priest, with his clean robes and well-fed face, reminds you every Sunday that your soul's on the line if you don't pay your tithe. 10% of everything you grow, raise, or make. Grain, eggs, even the wool from your one mangy sheep. It all goes to the church, which is richer than the Lord and twice as sanctimonious. Miss a payment, and you're not just risking a fine, you're risking eternal torment, or at least a public shaming in front of the whole village. The priest's sermons are full of talk about charity and salvation, but you've noticed he's not starving, and his church is built of stone while your hut crumbles. You'd laugh at the absurdity if it weren't so exhausting. You're giving your last scraps to a God who, according to the priest, loves you but will burn you for eternity if you don't comply. It's a deal that feels like it was written by a particularly vindictive merchant. And let's not forget the king, who's so far above you he might as well be a myth. You'll never see him, but his tax collectors make sure you feel his presence. They come for taxes to fund wars you'll never understand, fought in places you'll never visit, for reasons you'll never care about. They want coin, but you rarely have any, so they take grain, livestock, or the one decent tunic you own. If you're lucky, they come once a year. If you're not, they're back sooner, with a list of your debts and a smile that says they enjoy their work a little too much. The king's supposed to keep the realm stable, but from where you're standing, he's just another hand in your pocket, taking what little you have left. The real sting is how everyone above you acts like they're doing you a favour. The Lord protects you from bandits, who are probably just desperate peasants from another village. The church saves your soul, assuming you can afford the price of admission. The king keeps the peace, except when he's drafting your sons to die in his wars, or seizing your harvest to feed his armies. It's a system so rigged it's almost comical, like a game where the rules change every time you start to win. You're caught in a cycle of labour and loss, where every step forward feels like 2 steps back. Yet there are moments when you push back, in your own quiet way. Maybe you forget to report a few eggs to the tithe collector, or you barter a handful of grain with a neighbour for a bit of their cheese. These are small acts, barely noticeable, but they're yours. You've heard whispers of peasants who've stood up to the bailiff, refusing to pay a fine for some petty infraction. It rarely ends well. Floggings, fines, or worse. But the stories spread, and they keep you going. You're not a rebel, not really, but you're not broken either. You hoe your field, you pay your dues, and you keep your head down, because that's the only way to survive. As you work your own plot in the fading light, you glance at the manor house again, its silhouette dark against the sky. You wonder if the Lord ever thinks about you, the person who keeps his table full, his fires lit, his life easy. Probably not. To him, you're just part of the land, like the ox or the plough, useful until you're not. You shake your head and keep working, because what else can you do? The weight of duty is heavy, but you carry it day after day, because it's all you know. And somewhere deep down there's a stubborn spark that refuses to let them take everything. Night has fallen, and you're back in your hut, the air thick with the scent of damp straw and smoke. The fire is little more than a pile of embers, just enough to keep the chill at bay, but not enough to waste the precious wood you spent hours gathering. You're a peasant in medieval Europe, around 1250, and your body is heavy with the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones. You lie on your straw-stuffed sack, the coarse fabric prickling your skin, and stare at the low ceiling of your wattle and daub home. Sleep should come easily after a day of back-breaking labour, but it doesn't. Sleep is a luxury, and survival is a gamble you play every day, with odds that would make a modern bookmaker wince. As a peasant, your life hangs by a fragile thread, woven from hunger, disease, and the constant threat of violence, a thread that could snap with one bad harvest, one fever, or one wrong step. Disease is your shadow, always lurking, never fully seen. You don't know about germs or viruses, but you know the signs. A cough that won't quit, a fever that burns too long, a rash that spreads like wildfire. The plague hasn't hit your village yet, but you've heard stories from travellers. Entire towns emptied, bodies piled in the streets. Even without the plague, illness is a constant. A cut from a rusty plough could fester. A cold could turn deadly, and childbirth is as likely to kill as it is to bring life. Your kids are the most vulnerable, their small bodies no match for the fevers that sweep through every winter. Half of them won't see adulthood, a fact you carry like a stone in your chest. Medicine is a patchwork of superstition and hope. Herbs you gather from the woods, prayers you mutter to a god who seems distracted, maybe a charm from the village wise woman if you can spare a turnip to barter. None of it works reliably. If you get sick, you either pull through or you don't. Doctors are for the rich, and even they're more likely to bleed you dry than cure you. The irony is grim. You spend your life keeping the Lord's fields alive, but no one's working to keep you alive. Hunger is another enemy, as constant as the seasons, but far less predictable. You're a farmer, so you'd think food would be the least of your worries, but the system is rigged against you. Most of your harvest goes to the Lord or the church, leaving you with just enough to scrape by, if the weather cooperates. A wet spring, a dry summer, or a swarm of pests can turn a year's work into dust. You've seen it happen. Families eating grass, boiling bark, or digging up roots just to fill their bellies. Last year, a blight took half the rye crop, and you watched your neighbour's youngest waste away, too weak to cry. The Lord might open his granary in a crisis, but it's not charity, it's a loan, and he'll expect repayment with interest, usually in labour or grain you can't spare. The church might offer a bowl of thin gruel, but only if you're pious enough, and even then, it's barely enough to keep a sparrow alive. You've learned to stretch what little you have, mixing chaff into your bread, watering down your pottage until it's more broth than stew. Every meal is a calculation, a balance between hunger today and starvation tomorrow. The dry humour in it is that you're surrounded by food, fields of wheat, orchards of apples, but it's not yours. It's like being a fish in a river you're not allowed to drink. Violence is the third thread in this unravelling tapestry. Your village isn't a war zone, but peace is a fragile thing. Bandits roam the roads, often desperate men from villages not much worse off than yours. A rogue knight or a band of mercenaries might pass through, taking what they want: your grain, your livestock, sometimes your dignity. You're not armed, not trained, and definitely not ready to fight. If trouble comes, you hide in the woods or behind your flimsy door, praying they pass you by. Even the Lord's men, the ones meant to protect you, can be a threat. A drunken soldier or an overzealous bailiff might decide your hut looks like a good place to make trouble. And then there's the king's wars, distant conflicts you'll never understand but might still claim you. If the call comes, your sons could be drafted, sent off with a rusty spear to die for a cause that means nothing to you. The absurdity is almost laughable. The people who swear to keep you safe are often the ones who put you in danger, and your best defense is hoping no one notices you exist. You lie there, listening to the wind rattle the walls of your hut. Your family is curled up nearby. Your spouse, your children, if they're still with you. Their breathing is soft but uneven, a reminder of how fragile they are. You're all tired, all hungry, all hoping tomorrow will be better, but deep down you know the truth. Being a peasant means living on a knife's edge. One bad season could starve you, one illness could end you, one raid could burn your world to ash. The humour, if you can call it that, is in the stubbornness of it all. You keep going, not because you're brave or noble, but because stopping isn't an option. You've seen families give up, seen them wander off to beg or die quietly in the woods, but you're still here, still fighting for one more day. There are moments, though, when you steal a bit of life back from the grind. Maybe you find a wild apple tree the Lord hasn't claimed, and you share the fruit with your kids, their faces lighting up at the rare sweetness. Maybe you tell a story by the fire, a tale of a clever peasant outwitting a greedy bailiff, and for a moment the hut feels warm. These are small rebellions, not enough to change the world, but enough to keep you sane. You've heard of uprisings, of peasants who took up pitchforks and torches, but those stories end in blood. Your rebellion is quieter, woven into the way you hide a few extra grains in your pocket or teach your daughter to spot edible herbs in the forest. It's survival, yes, but it's also defiance, a refusal to let the world break you completely. As you close your eyes, the embers glowing faintly, you think about tomorrow. Another day of labour, another day of hunger, another day of dodging the dangers that circle like wolves. You don't know if you'll make it through the next winter, or if your kids will outlive you, or if the Lord will decide to raise his taxes again. But you know you'll get up at dawn, pull on your itchy tunic, and head to the fields, because that's what you do. The thread of your life is fragile, but it's yours, and you hold it tight, even as the world tries to pull it apart. Dawn creeps over the horizon, and you're awake again, stirring on your straw-stuffed sack in your mud-walled hut. The air is sharp with the chill of early morning, and the faint smell of smoke lingers from last night's fire. You're a peasant in medieval Europe, around 1250, and your life is a cycle of labour, hunger, and duty that feels as unyielding as the seasons. Yet, as you pull on your coarse wool tunic, its itch a familiar annoyance, you feel a flicker of something stubborn inside you. It's not the fire of a revolutionary, not the kind of defiance that leads to pitchforks and uprisings, because those usually end with heads on pikes or families scattered to the wind. No, your rebellion is quieter, woven into the everyday acts that keep you and your family alive. It's a subtle, persistent refusal to let the world grind you into nothing, a way of carving out meaning in a life that seems designed to deny you any. You step outside, the village stirring around you. Roosters crow, though you're not sure why they bother. You've been up before the light, as always. The Lord's fields wait, demanding your labour, but today you're thinking about your own small plot, the one you tend after the Lord's work is done. It's barely enough to feed your family, but it's yours, and that matters. You've learned to stretch what little you have to make it count. Last week you slipped a handful of barley into your pocket before the bailiff could tally the harvest. It wasn't much, just enough for an extra loaf, but as you kneaded the dough last night, it felt like a victory. You didn't steal, you'd never call it that, but you took what you needed, what you earned. The Lord won't miss a few grains, but for you, it's a meal, a moment when your kids didn't go to bed hungry. The humour here is dry as the dust in your fields. The same system that demands everything from you doesn't even notice when you claw back a sliver for yourself. Your rebellion lives in these small acts, the ones no one writes songs about. You barter with a neighbour, trading a leek for a scrap of cheese they managed to hide from the tithe collector. You teach your son to spot mushrooms in the forest, the kind the Lord's men don't know about, and you show your daughter how to mend a tunic so it lasts another winter. These aren't grand gestures, but they're yours, and they keep you going. You've heard whispers of peasants who defy the Lord outright, grinding their own grain at home to avoid the mill tax, or fishing in the stream when the bailiff's not looking. Those are dangerous games, and the punishment is swift. A fine you can't pay, a flogging, or worse. But the stories spread, and they plant a seed. You don't have a quern hidden under your floorboards, but you think about it, and the thought alone feels like a spark. There are moments when the weight of the world lifts, just for a little while. A festival comes, one of the rare days when the church and the Lord loosen their grip. The village gathers in the square, and there's music. A fiddler with a tune that makes your feet move despite the ache in your bones. You drink stronger ale than usual, not the weak stuff you sip all day, and for a few hours you forget the hunger, the taxes, the endless labour. You dance with your spouse, your kids laughing as they chase each other through the crowd, and it's almost enough to make you believe life could be more than survival. Or maybe it's a quiet evening in your hut, when you tell your children a story by the firelight, a tale of a clever peasant who outwits a greedy lord, or a fox who tricks a wolf. They listen, wide-eyed, and you see a glimmer of hope in their faces, a belief that maybe they'll find a way to be more than what the world expects. These moments are fleeting, but they're precious, like finding a ripe apple in a tree the Lord hasn't claimed. The irony of your life is that it's both crushing and resilient. You're not free, not by any stretch, but you're not broken either. The Lord takes your labour, the church takes your grain, the king takes your sons for his wars, but they can't take everything. They can't take the way you share a joke with your neighbour about the bailiff's new hat, which looks like it was stolen from a scarecrow. You laugh quietly, because loud laughter might draw attention, and attention is rarely good. They can't take the pride you feel when your crops come in, even if most of it goes to the manor. They can't take the way you hold your family close at night, your bodies pressed together on the straw, sharing warmth against the cold. These are the things you hold on to, the things that make you more than a serf, more than a name on the Lord's ledger. You've heard of rebellions, real ones, where peasants rose up and burned manors or drove off tax collectors. They're rare, and they almost always end badly. Villages razed, leaders hanged, families left to starve. You're not that kind of rebel. Your fight is in the everyday, in the way you keep going despite it all. You plant your crops, knowing most will go to others. You raise your kids, knowing they might not outlive you. You pay your taxes, knowing there'll never be enough. And yet, you endure. You find ways to outlast the system, to bend without breaking. Maybe you hum a tune as you work, one the priest would disapprove of, or you carve a small figure from a scrap of wood, something to make your kids smile. These are your rebellions, small and silent, but they're enough to keep the spark alive. As you stand in your field, the first light of dawn warming your face, you think about the future. It's a dangerous thing to hope, but you can't help it. Maybe your kids will have it better. Maybe they'll find a way to be free, or at least freer than you. You don't know, and you don't have the energy to dream too big. But you keep working, turning the soil, planting the seeds, because that's the deal you were born into. The Lord's manor looms in the distance, a reminder of everything you'll never have, but you don't look at it today. Instead, you focus on the earth under your feet, the one thing that feels like it belongs to you, even if the law says otherwise. You smile at the absurdity of it all, a life so hard, so unfair, and yet somehow yours. It's not much, but it's enough to keep you going, one quiet rebellion at a time. So as you drift towards sleep, think about those quiet rebels, those stubborn survivors who kept going despite it all. Maybe light a candle for them, or just pull your blanket a little closer. If this tale wove its way into your dreams, maybe share it with someone else, but only if you feel like it. For now, let the night take you and rest well. Let's jump now to a gentle step back in time, to a dusty field in medieval Europe where the air hums with the chaos of a fair. Imagine a place where the scent of roasted mutton clashes with the dubious aroma of unwashed tunics, where a juggler might drop his clubs and a merchant might sell you a holy relic that's suspiciously similar to a chicken bone. It's a strange, forgotten slice of history, lively, absurd, and oddly comforting in its messiness. You wake up in medieval Europe. The year is 1347, and the sun is barely peeking over the horizon. Your straw mattress crinkles beneath you, a reminder that comfort is a modern invention. Outside your window, or rather, the hole in your wall that passes for a window, the distant clamour of the fair already stirs. It's the third day of the annual market fair in your small English village, a spectacle that draws peddlers, pilgrims, and pickpockets from miles around. You pull on your woolen tunic, scratchy but warm, and lace up boots that have seen better days. The air is cool, tinged with the earthy scent of dew and the faint promise of chaos. As you step outside, the village is already buzzing. A cart creaks by, its wheels wobbling like they're auditioning for a comedy. The driver, a farmer with a face like weathered leather, curses his ox, who seems to have opinions about the route. You smile. Oxen, it turns out, are the original rebels. The fairground lies just beyond the church, in a field that's usually home to grazing sheep. Today, it's a patchwork of colourful tents, makeshift stalls, and a crowd that's equal parts excited and suspicious. Fairs, you see, are where dreams meet scams, and everyone knows it. You weave through the early risers, nodding to a baker who's already shouting about his freshly baked loaves. They're probably a day old, but in a world without preservatives, fresh is a relative term. A soft breeze carries the sound of a lute, slightly out of tune, and you can't help but feel a flicker of anticipation. The fair is a rare break from the grind of ploughing fields and praying for rain. For one day, you're not just a peasant. You're an adventurer in a world of wonders, even if half of them are trying to rob you blind. You step into the heart of the fair, where stalls sprawl like a village planned by a drunken cartographer, each one clamouring for your attention with shouts and promises. The air is thick with wood smoke, sweat, and the faint whiff of overripe fruit, a scent that clings to your woolen tunic like an uninvited guest. Merchants stand behind rickety tables, their voices weaving a tapestry of temptation, some earnest, some sly, all rehearsed to perfection. "Spices from the east," one bellows, hoisting a sack that might hold saffron or might just be dyed sawdust. You squint, wondering if the east he speaks of is more Ipswich than India. Another vendor, with a grin too wide for comfort, offers genuine relics of saints you've never heard of. A knucklebone of St. Ermengarde, perhaps, or a lock of hair from St. Dubius. You're not buying it, literally or figuratively, but the audacity is almost charming, like a jest told by a friend who knows he's overstayed his welcome. You pause at a stall displaying knives, their blades catching the morning sun like tiny mirrors. The smith, a burly man with a beard that looks like it lost a fight with a candle, swears they're forged with dragon's breath. Dragons haven't roamed England since the last bard got too creative with his tales, but you nod politely, humouring his enthusiasm. You run your thumb along a blade's edge, sharp enough to cut your pride, if not much else. The price he quotes could buy a new cow, maybe two if they're having an off day. You smile, murmur something vague about returning later, and slip back into the crowd, leaving him to his dreams of dragonfire and dubious metallurgy. The crowd around you is a living mosaic, a jumble of faces and fates. a monk in a habit so frayed it's practically a suggestion, a squire polishing his master's ego more than his armour, and a woman selling apples with a glare that could curdle milk. You buy an apple from her, more to avoid her wrath than out of hunger. It's tart, with a speck of grit that reminds you medieval quality control is more hope than practice. You crunch thoughtfully, weaving through the throng, dodging a child chasing a chicken that's clearly winning the race. Nearby, a storyteller holds court, spinning a tale of Charlemagne that's more fiction than chronicle. His arms flail like he's fending off invisible foes, and the crowd laps it up, facts be damned. You smirk. History here is less about truth and more about who can shout the loudest, a lesson as old as the dirt under your boots. A glint of colour catches your eye, a stall draped with silks from Byzantium. The fabric is soft, almost too fine for this muddy field, and you can't resist brushing your fingers against it. It's like touching a whisper of another world, one where people bathe more than once a season and don't haggle over turnips. The merchant, with eyes sharper than his wares, names a price that could buy half your village and a neighbouring one for good measure. You laugh softly, a sound lost in the fair's din, and step back. Undeterred, he thrusts a magic amulet at you, 3 shillings for a stone that looks like it rolled out of a riverbed. Protection from plague, he claims, which is a bold pitch considering the Black Death is about to make its grand entrance in a year or two. You decline, trusting your luck over his pebbles, and melt back into the crowd, your purse still safely tucked beneath your tunic. The fair is a game of wits, and you're learning the rules. Every stall is a tiny battlefield, each merchant a general armed with honeyed words and sticky fingers. You pass a man selling miracle tonics in cloudy bottles, his patter so smooth you almost believe he's cured death itself. He claims his brew can mend a broken heart or a broken leg, whichever ails you first. A woman nearby hawks ribbons, swearing they'll make your beloved swoon. You don't have a beloved, but you consider buying one just to see if it works on the neighbour's goat, which has been giving you side-eye for weeks. The absurdity of it all is soothing in its own way, like a lullaby sung by a con artist who's just charming enough to forgive. You drift toward a stall piled high with pottery, the kind that looks sturdy enough to survive a tavern brawl. The potter, a wiry woman with clay smudged on her cheek, is haggling with a farmer who's offering a sack of barley for a jug. She's not impressed, and her sharp tongue makes you glad you're not the one bargaining. You pick up a small clay cup, turning it in your hands. It's plain, unglazed, but there's something honest about its weight. You pay a penny, a fair price, and slip it into your satchel. It's not much, but it's real, unlike the unicorn horn powder being peddled at the next stall. You overhear the vendor's pitch, guaranteed to cure baldness or attract wealth, depending on how you snort it. You have to admire the creativity, if not the ethics. Unicorns are as real as the merchant's sincerity, but the crowd is eating it up, coins changing hands faster than village gossip. Further along, a spice merchant catches your attention, his table a riot of colours, reds, yellows, and browns in little heaps that promise exotic flavours. He's quieter than the others, letting his wares speak for themselves. You lean in, catching a whiff of something warm and unfamiliar, maybe cinnamon or something masquerading as it. He offers you a pinch to taste, and you hesitate. Medieval hygiene is a gamble at best. But his calm demeanour wins you over, and you try it. It's sharp, almost fiery, and you cough, drawing a chuckle from him. Not for the faint of heart, he says, and you nod, eyes watering. You don't buy anything. Spices are a luxury for knights and fools. But the moment lingers, a small spark of connection in the fair's chaos. As you move on, you notice a pickpocket working the crowd, his hands darting like minnows. He's young, barely more than a boy, and his targets are too distracted by shiny trinkets to notice. You clutch your purse a little tighter, but you can't help feeling a twinge of sympathy. In a world where survival is a daily haggle, who's to say you wouldn't try the same? You sidestep a pile of something you hope is mud and find yourself back where you started, the knife seller still shouting about dragons. The fair is a circle, a maze with no end, and yet it's comforting in its predictability. Every pitch, every dodge, every dubious relic is part of the rhythm, a dance as old as trade itself. You take a deep breath, the apple's tartness still on your tongue, and let the fair's strange music carry you forward. The sun climbs higher, warming the fairground as you wander from the merchant's maze into a clearing where the air buzzes with laughter and anticipation. It's midday now, and the fair is a living pulse of noise and colour, a chaotic symphony of shouts, clinking coins, and the occasional bleat of a wayward goat. You find yourself drawn to a wooden stage, little more than a platform of warped planks, where a juggler is holding court. His hands are a blur, tossing apples, torches, and what looks suspiciously like a turnip in a dizzying arc. The crowd around you is rapt, their faces lit with delight, though you notice a few apples bear dents from less successful performances. He's good, but not perfect, and there's something oddly comforting in his near misses, as if the world doesn't demand flawlessness today. "Catch!" he calls, his voice bright but strained, and he lobs an apple into the crowd. It sails over your head and lands in the grubby hands of a boy who promptly takes a bite, ignoring the juggler's mock horror. The crowd roars with laughter, and you can't help but chuckle, the sound soft in your throat. Medieval entertainment is nothing if not interactive, a shared jest where everyone's in on the punchline. The juggler recovers with a theatrical bow, his patched tunic flapping like a flag of surrender. His grin is infectious, and you find yourself rooting for him, dents and all. He's not just juggling props, but the crowd's mood, keeping it light despite the heat and the dust that clings to your boots. You settle against a post, its wood warm from the sun, and let the scene unfold. Nearby, a troop of mummers is setting up. Their costumes a patchwork of ambition and old cloth, sacks dyed with whatever berries were cheapest, stitched with more hope than skill. They're preparing a play about a knight, a dragon, and a princess who seems perpetually confused, judging by the script shouted across the stage. The props are wobbly, the dialogue cruder than the ale you'll drink later, but the crowd doesn't care. They're here for the spectacle, not the subtlety, and you're no different. A line flubs, the knight trips on his own cape, and the laughter ripples through the air like a breeze. You lean back, the post creaking under your weight, and feel the day's tension ease. Chaos, it turns out, can be soothing when it's this joyful. The juggler finishes his act with a flourish, catching all 3 torches, barely, and the crowd claps, tossing a few pennies into the dirt at his feet. He scoops them up with a grin, as if he's just won a kingdom, and you wonder what his life is like when the fair moves on. Does he practice with turnips in some lonely barn, dreaming of bigger stages? You shake your head, amused at your own sentimentality. The fair doesn't leave room for deep thoughts. It's too busy pulling you along with its current. You push off the post and drift toward the mummers, who are now in full swing, the dragon roaring with a voice that sounds suspiciously like a man who's had too much mead. A sudden commotion pulls your attention away. 2 men are arguing over a pig, their voices rising over the mummers' performance, like crows over a field. The pig, unimpressed, snuffles in the dirt, rooting for scraps while the men gesture wildly. One claims he bought it fair and square, the other insists it's his, stolen from his pen last night. The crowd forms a loose circle, more entertained by the dispute than the play. A local reeve steps in, his authority as shaky as the stage's planks, but his voice carries the weight of someone used to being obeyed. He proposes a solution so convoluted, something about splitting the pig's future litters, and a barrel of ale as compensation, that it sounds like it was dreamed up by a lawyer with a hangover. The men grumble, the crowd murmurs, and you catch yourself smiling at the absurdity. Medieval justice, you're learning, is less about fairness and more about who can outlast the other in a shouting match. You turn back to the mummers, who've soldiered on despite the interruption. The princess is now arguing with the dragon, who's forgotten his lines and is improvising with gusto. The knight, meanwhile, is tangled in his cape again, and the crowd's laughter is warm, unguarded, a sound that wraps around you like a blanket. You glance at the sky, the sun now high and fierce, and wipe a bead of sweat from your brow. The fair is a world unto itself, a bubble of noise and nonsense where the rules of the everyday, plough the field, pray for rain, survive the winter, seem to bend. You spot a girl selling posies, her basket overflowing with wilted flowers she's trying to pass off as fresh. "A penny for love," she calls, and you decline, but her cheeky grin makes you wish you had a penny to spare. The juggler reappears, this time with a partner, a woman with a lute slung over her shoulder. She strums a tune slightly off key, and he begins juggling again, this time with knives. The crowd gasps, but you notice the blades are dull, more for show than danger. It's a clever trick, like so much of the fair, illusion dressed up as spectacle. You clap anyway, because effort deserves something, even if it's just politeness. The lute player's song is about a maiden lost in a forest, and though her voice wavers, there's a sincerity that tugs at you. You wonder if she wrote it herself, or if it's just another borrowed tale, like the relics and spices you've seen today. Either way, it's a moment of quiet beauty in the fair's clamour, and you let it linger, your breath slowing as the notes drift over the crowd. A child tugs at your sleeve, offering a sticky handful of candied nuts for a halfpenny. You hesitate, your purse is light, and medieval food safety is a roll of the dice. But his wide eyes win you over. You hand over the coin, and the nuts are sweet, if a bit gritty, like everything else here. You munch slowly, watching the fair pulse around you. A dog steals a sausage from a distracted vendor, earning a curse and a cheer from the onlookers. A woman haggles over a bolt of cloth, her voice sharp but playful, as if she's enjoying the fight as much as the deal. The fair is a dance, you realise, a messy, joyful waltz where everyone's trying to keep step without tripping over their own feet. As the mummer's play stumbles to its end, the crowd thins slightly, some drifting toward the food stalls, others toward the next spectacle. You linger, reluctant to leave the stage's orbit. The juggler and his lute-playing partner are packing up, sharing a quiet laugh over something you can't hear. There's a camaraderie in their ease, a reminder that the fair, for all its scams and shouts, is built on moments like these. People coming together, if only for a day, to laugh, to dream, to forget the plough and the rain. You take a deep breath, the air now tinged with the promise of evening, and feel the fair's rhythm settle into your bones. It's not perfect, but it's alive, and for now, that's enough. The sun dips low, painting the fairground in hues of amber and gold, and you feel the day's energy soften, like a fire settling into embers. The air carries the rich scent of roasted meat, mingling with the tang of ale, and a faint whiff of something you'd rather not name, perhaps a forgotten pile of scraps behind a stall. The fair is quieter now, its frenetic pulse slowing as merchants pack up their more dubious wares, and the crowd drifts toward a long table near the church where a communal feast is taking shape. You follow, drawn by the promise of food and the soft hum of voices, your boots scuffing the well-trodden earth. The fair, for all its chaos, is winding down into something warmer, something shared, and you're ready to be part of it. The table is a rough affair, planks balanced on barrels, sagging slightly under the weight of platters. It's not a feast for kings, more like a feast for survivors, cobbled together from whatever the village could spare. There's bread, crusty and dense, cheese that's sharp enough to wake you from a nap, and a stew that's more mystery than recipe, bubbling in a cauldron that looks older than the church itself. You squeeze onto a bench between a tanner, whose leathery scent clings to him like a loyal dog, and a widow with a mug of ale in each hand, her laughter already louder than the minstrel tuning his lute nearby. You settle in, the wood creaking beneath you, and feel the day's dust settle too, as if the fair is exhaling into dusk. A woman ladles stew into your bowl, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. You thank her, and she nods, her smile as worn as her apron. The stew is hearty, thick with barley and bits of something that might be mutton, or might not. You decide not to question it. In 1347, curiosity about ingredients is a luxury you can't afford. You tear off a hunk of bread, its crust fighting your teeth, and dip it into the stew. It's good, surprisingly so, warming your belly and easing the ache in your legs from hours of wandering. The tanner grumbles about the price of hides, the widow counters with a tale of her late husband's disastrous attempt at brewing, and you listen, spooning stew, letting their voices wrap around you like a familiar blanket. The minstrel begins to play, his lute's notes soft but slightly off-key, as if the instrument is as tired as the crowd. He sings of a knight who loved unwisely, a ballad that's all longing and loss, perfect for the fading light. The melody drifts over the table, blending with the clink of mugs and the murmur of gossip. Someone claims the king's army is marching nearby, a rumour as reliable as a merchant's holy relic. Another swears they saw a two-headed calf last week, and you wonder if they've been sampling the ale or the tonic seller's wares. You smile into your bowl, the stew's warmth spreading through you, and let the stories wash over you, each one wilder than the last. Across the table, a merchant you recognize from earlier, the one with the Byzantine silks, is holding court, regaling his neighbours with tales of his travels. He speaks of cities you'll never see, where spices grow on trees and gold flows like water. You're not sure if he's been farther than the next county, but his audience is rapt, their faces glowing in the torchlight. You catch his eye, and he winks as if you're in on the jest. You nod back, amused. The fair is full of liars, but the good ones make it feel like magic, and you're content to let the illusion linger. A child scurries by, offering a tray of dried figs for a penny. You hesitate. Your purse is lighter than you'd like, but her gap-toothed grin is hard to resist. You hand over the coin, and the figs are sweet, if a bit chewy, like eating a memory of summer. You savour them slowly, watching the crowd. A man spills ale on his tunic and curses with a creativity that would make a bard blush. A woman haggles with a baker over a loaf, her voice sharp but playful, as if the argument is half the fun. The feast is a tapestry of small moments, laughter, complaints, the clatter of spoons, like the fair itself, messy but alive. The minstrel switches to a livelier tune, and a few brave souls start to dance, their steps clumsy but joyful. The widow beside you claps along, her ale sloshing dangerously, and you wonder if she'll make it through the night without a tumble. The tanner joins in, his voice a low rumble, and you find yourself tapping your foot, caught in the rhythm. It's not elegant. No one would mistake this for a lord's banquet, but it's real. A moment of connection in a world that's often too hard, too cold. You glance at the sky, where the first stars are peeking through, and feel a quiet contentment settle in your chest. You spot the juggler from earlier, sitting by a fire a few paces away, eating an apple he didn't throw. His patched tunic glows in the flickering light, and he looks tired but content, his hands still for once. He catches your eye and raises the apple in a mock toast, and you nod back, feeling a strange kinship. The fair is a world of hustlers and dreamers, and for today, you're one of them, woven into its strange, vibrant fabric. You take another sip of ale, watery, but it does the job, and let the minstrel's song carry you. The lyrics are about a river that never runs dry, and though you doubt such a place exists, the idea is soothing, a gentle anchor in the fading day. The table grows quieter as the feast winds down, plates emptying and voices softening. A few merchants linger, still hawking their wares to stragglers, but their cries lack the morning's fire. The crowd thins, some heading home, others curling up by fires to sleep off the ale. You linger, reluctant to leave the warmth of the table, the glow of the torches, the hum of the lute. The fair has been a whirlwind of noise and nonsense, but here, at dusk, it feels like a gift, a rare pause in a life of labour. You run your fingers along the edge of your bowl, its roughness grounding you, and breathe in the smoky air. The night is coming, but for now, you're here, surrounded by strangers who feel like family, if only for an hour. The stars are out now, pinpricks of light scattered across a sky so vast it feels like it could swallow the fair whole. The torches cast flickering shadows, their glow fading as the fairground quiets, a beast settling into slumber. You linger near the church, where the feast's remnants, empty bowls, scattered crumbs, and a few snoring revellers mark the end of the day's chaos. The air is cooler now, carrying the earthy scent of trampled grass and the faint smoke of dying fires. Your boots feel heavier, the day's wandering etched into your souls, but your heart is light, buoyed by the fair's strange magic. You take a final glance at the stalls, their colours muted in the dusk, and begin your walk home, the path familiar yet new under the starlight. The fairground fades behind you, its noise softening into a distant hum, replaced by the gentle chirp of crickets and the rustle of leaves stirred by a breeze. You clutch the small wooden bead in your pocket, bought for a penny from a stall whose owner swore it was carved from an ancient oak. It's nothing special, just a smooth, unassuming trinket, but it feels like a piece of the day, a tangible memory of the merchant's shouts and the juggler's fumbles. You roll it between your fingers, its weight grounding you as you step onto the dirt path that winds towards your village. The world feels quieter now, as if the fair's energy has spent itself, leaving only echoes. A dog barks in the distance, sharp and fleeting, and you smile. Medieval dogs, it seems, are as opinionated as their owners. The path is uneven, rutted from carts and careless feet, but you know it by heart, each dip and curve a map of your daily life. You pass a field where sheep huddle, their wool pale in the moonlight, and wonder if they dream of the fair's chaos or simply of grass. The thought is absurd, but the fair has left you whimsical, your mind still dancing with its colours and quirks. You hum a snatch of the minstrel's ballad, the one about the knight who loved unwisely, though your version is as off-key as the lute that played it. A flicker of movement catches your eye, a fire-breather, the one with the singed eyebrows, practicing alone by a dying bonfire. His flames are small now, more spark than spectacle, but he's still at it, as if the fair isn't over until he says so. You pause, watching from a distance, his silhouette a quiet defiance against the night. He's not performing for a crowd, just for himself, and there's something oddly moving in that. You clap softly, though he can't hear you, and move on, the path pulling you forward. The fair, you're learning, is as much about these fleeting moments as it is about the noise and bustle. The village comes into view, its thatched roofs dark against the sky, a few windows glowing with candlelight. You pass a neighbour's cottage where a shutter creaks in the breeze and hear the low murmur of a lullaby. Someone else is winding down, just like you. Your mind drifts back to the fair, the merchant with his Byzantine silks, the juggler's dented apples, the pig dispute that ended in a grudging handshake. It's also wonderfully absurd, a tapestry of human folly woven with threads of hope. You chuckle, the sound soft in the quiet night, and wonder if the relic seller ever convinced anyone that his chicken bone was sacred. A rustle in the bushes startles you, but it's just a fox, its eyes glinting before it darts away. You relax, your hand loosening on the bead in your pocket. The fair has left you wary. Pickpockets and con artists have a way of sharpening your senses, but it's also left you open, as if the day's chaos cracked something loose in you. You think of the lute player, her wavering voice carrying that forest maiden's tale, and wonder if she's walking a path like this one, her lute slung over her shoulder, her dreams bigger than the fair's muddy field. You hope so, though you know dreams in 1347 are as fragile as the potter's unglazed cup you bought. The path curves past a stream, its water gurgling over stones, a sound so steady it feels like the world's heartbeat. You pause, crouching to dip your fingers in the cool water, washing away the fair's dust. It's a small ritual, a way to mark the transition from the fair's whirlwind to the quiet of home. You stand, shaking droplets from your hand, and catch a glimpse of your reflection in the water, blurred but familiar. The fair has changed you, if only for tonight, making you feel like a traveller in your own life, a wanderer who's seen wonders and scams in equal measure. Your cottage comes into view, its outline soft in the starlight, the straw roof sagging like an old friend who's had too much ale. You push open the door, the familiar scent of wood smoke and straw welcoming you back. Inside, the air is still, the day's warmth lingering in the walls. You set the wooden bead on a shelf next to a chipped bowl and a candle stub, and smile at its simplicity. It's not a relic or a magic amulet, but it's yours, a token of a day when the world felt bigger, brighter, stranger. You kick off your boots, the floor cool against your feet, and lie down on your straw mattress, its crinkle a reminder of the life you'll return to tomorrow. As you settle in, your mind wanders back to the fair one last time. You see the tanner's leathery grin, the widow's sloshing mugs, the child with her sticky candied nuts. You hear the mummer's clumsy lines, the reeve's convoluted ruling, the soft strum of the lute under the stars. It's a world of hustlers and dreamers, of grit and magic, and you were part of it, if only for a day. The fair is gone now, its tents folding, its merchants moving on, but it lingers in you, a story you'll carry into sleep. You close your eyes, the cricket's song drifting through the window, and let the fair's rhythm fade, replaced by the slow, steady pull of dreams. The night is deep now, the village silent save for the occasional creak or bark. You think of the fire breather, his sparks defying the dark, and the juggler, his apples spinning through the air. You think of the stew, its mystery ingredients somehow perfect, and the apple you ate, grit and all. The fair was a mess, a marvel, a moment, and as you drift off, you feel it settle into your bones, a warmth that carries you into sleep. Tomorrow the plough and the fields will call, but tonight you're still at the fair, walking its dusty lanes, a pilgrim in a world that's both strange and home.